You just have to be curious enough, right? To just be like, let me learn more today, just a little bit here and there. And you're not it's going to be overwhelming because there's so many things to like think about, right? But I think people just forget that we are thriving communities.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate, here for another inspiring episode. If you're new here, please make sure that you subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find all of our podcast episodes, our original documentary series, our social media links, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. Check it out. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome my friend Fawn Sampson. I recorded this episode forever ago and had never released it because I've been trying to pull together an entire series on Indigenous women for this podcast and figured I would just release Fawn's episode with that. But it's taken longer to find the right stories and connect with the women that we want to highlight. So I assure you a series on Indigenous women is coming, but I decided to release Fawn's episode as a standalone. Fawn is an incredible woman who does so much good in our world and so much for the Indigenous community. It's always been frustrating to me that the media doesn't often cover stories about the Indigenous peoples, yet there is so much to cover. There are great accomplishments to celebrate. They are spokespeople for our community and doing so much good in our world and helping us thrive in so many different ways. There are also critical topics that are difficult to talk about, like the scourge against Indigenous women, the genocide of the murdered and missing Indigenous women. But the media has been silent. So the world often ignores so many different communities, so many different populations, but the Indigenous community is one of them. If you listen to this podcast, you know that a big part of what we're trying to do here is highlight the stories that aren't often told by the media, forgotten about populations, topics that need to be discussed, and there's so much to unpack when it comes to the Indigenous community, so this is only the beginning. Fawn is a wife, a mother, an artist, a musician, a world changer who has a special interest in working with tribal nations. She does so much to promote and elevate Indigenous culture, protect it, cultivate it. She does so much to support her Indigenous brothers and sisters, our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and is always finding a way and finding different ways to elevate their voices, their stories, and support them. It's incredible. She's a board member of 100 Rural Women, and she's an educator with leadership and civil engagement in the Center for Community Vitality at the University of Minnesota. Fawn is an all-out incredible woman and shares her experiences of growing up on a reservation, her experiences throughout her life now with her family, and we talk about the great work that she's doing to change the world. Fawn has such a beautiful heart, and it's just been such a gift to spend this time with her, and I'm so excited to share her story with you. And like I said, this is just the beginning. We are going to do so much more to promote the stories of Indigenous women on this podcast. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Fawn. Fawn, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you on. I feel like this has been a long time coming because you and I have been talking for months and months and months about this. And I'm so excited that this has finally happened. And I'm excited to share your story and all the incredible work that you're doing and involved in. And we actually know each other because my sister became friends with you and she lived in Chicago. And when I started talking about doing something for One Girl Revolution on Native Americans and the culture and the peoples, she was like, you have to talk to Fawn. She has to be the first person that you talk to. And so I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you.
Well, before we get into all the stories that I want to talk to you about and all the different things, I'd love to ask you, who is a One Girl Revolution in your own life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
Wow. That's tough because I'm a huge supporter of women, and there's a lot of different women who support who I support, who inspire me in a lot of different ways. So as you'll get to know me throughout the podcast, you'll know that there's different places and things and that I've done and that I do. So if I think about culture, I think about my family and like my grandmothers who always made my dresses. But also I think about like my mother growing up. She mostly was a single mom, raised us, had me when she was 19. But I also think about like my best friends, the one that I made my earrings for, just yesterday finished them. She is 10 years older than me, but she is superwoman. So it depends on the situation, but there is a multitude of women in my life that I support and that inspire me like in so many different ways.
And that's a really good point too, because I feel like every woman behind her has an army supporting her, an army standing with her. And that's really all of our stories. And it's hard to see that sometimes. So I'm really glad that you shared that. So I want to talk about your early life, because I'm always intrigued how people's lives start out and like how that affects what they end up doing, what they're interested in, the work that they end up doing. So I would love to rewind and talk about your early life and who you are and where you're from and just a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah. So I work in leadership and civic engagement. So we're always doing like these little icebreakers. And we did one last week when I was part of this intense training. So when I was part of this training last week, they said, what's in a name? Right. So we went around the room and we would have to say, like, kind of give a little background on what our name is. So I went back to the day that I was born and my name is Fawn Jeanette. So Jeanette is my middle name. So my first name, Fawn, my mom really wanted a boy. She was 19 years old, young, just out of high school, really wanted a boy. And her and my dad had been together for years. They dated in high school. And so when I was born and I wasn't a boy, my mom was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a name. So just a year before that, she had a aunt who had passed away from a car accident, and her name was Glenna Jeanette, and she wanted to give me her name. But I think the family thought it was a little too soon for me to be born Glenna. So my mom's like, well, maybe I'll give her the middle name Jeanette then. So that's how I got my middle name. And then so she's flipping through a baby book of names and found Fawn. So that's how I was named Fawn. And I actually really love my name. But it's funny when I meet people, because I'm American Indian and Indigenous person, they're like, wow, what does it mean? I'm like, well, Fawn is the English word for a baby deer. Like, so it's given me, and I'm from Deer River, Minnesota. So I always got that growing up in high school as a Fawn from Deer River. I'm like, oh, I never put the two together until somebody said that. But I grew up in Deer River from my whole life, basically. I actually was born there, and I grew up in a small, I would call a village town on the reservation, just about 5 miles west of Deer River on Highway 2, about maybe 300 people. I spent most of my life there, and I also spent most of my life in another small village called Inger, Minnesota, which is about maybe 35 minutes north of Ball Club. That's where my dad's family is from. So my dad's side of the family, all Ojibwe, really cultural. It's where I get, they speak to Ojibwe, and that's where I get a lot of my cultural knowledge from. And then my mom's side is Ojibwe and German, as far as I know. I've never taken a DNA test because I'm weird about those things, thinking that they're going to clone me. That stuff. So, but I grew up in between those. My parents split when I was young. They were never married. So I spent a lot of time in both of those towns. So my dad lived up there in Inger, my mom lived in Ball Club, and I just was in between the two. I'm the oldest of, now 6. At the time, I only had my 2 brothers. My mom and dad had 3 kids together. And then my mom married, and my little brother came along. And then my dad had 2 other kids. So I have actually a 13 and a 14-year-old brother today. That's how old they are. So I didn't get my biological sister until I was 20 years old. I grew up with all boys mostly. But I did gain a stepsister. Her and I are pretty close. But she lived out in California. So I early on became really independent, navigated a lot of things on my own because my brothers were and still are my mom's babies. And she will always say to me this, she's like, you just grew up so fast and you were just so independent. And I grew up on the reservation, and I remember having to write letters to my friends' parents and just saying, hey, they can come to my house, it's safe. Like, because there's such a stigma around living on the reservation, right? And I lived on this street that was always in the paper, but it was like this really long street that wrapped around. And there was just so much stigma around reservation living. But for me, I was one of those kids who played imaginary games. And I would play in the woods and, play with all the neighborhood kids. And to me, this was normal, having 10 kids' bikes in our yards, hanging out, and, everybody's staying over for days. And you're like, well, maybe you should go home now. Maybe you want to go home now. And that's just the life of like the reservation. Like, you just are so used to having so many people around. Your community becomes your family. And a lot of them are your family. I'm related to a lot of people within my community because that's where we've been forever, for a really long time. And my family expands across the Leech Lake Reservation, where I am an enrolled member. I have a very large family. I think my dad's mom was one of 14. And my grandma on my mom's side is one of maybe like 7, 8, maybe. So, back in the day, they had lots of kids. So the families were large. So I keep meeting cousins to this day, and I'm 35. So I finally stayed put in one school from 3rd grade on all the way in Deer River. So 3rd to 12th grade, I went to school with the same people. I was just telling my husband the other day, I was like, I had a locker next to my cousin, and she just developed this like technique of like, when I would show up, she would move her door. And it's like this like routine that we had when I would come get my books. And I was like, just reminiscing, because now that we've moved back to Grand Rapids, I just think about my son being able to be stable and be in a space. Because my husband never had a place he would call home. He traveled around so much. So him and I are opposite in that way. We're both Geminis too. So there's like 4 of us in this relationship. But yeah, growing up, like I said, I was involved in everything in high school. There was another question that we had was like, when were the times where you felt included and excluded?
Great question.
And that was, I was part of an anti-racist pedagogy across the curriculum training last week. So it was pretty intense. I normally don't like to engage myself in the anti-racist talk because it's so heavy. Being an Indigenous person in the room and an educator, you literally feel like the goggles or glasses or microscope is right on you. And I said, I don't know if I ever really felt that I was included like anywhere. And I don't know if it's because I just felt so different. I mean, I've been called an apple before. And for those, I realize that people don't know what that means. It's red on the outside and white on the inside, kind of similar to what people call Black people Oreos. They would call me an apple. I've been called that a few times in my life, and that stuck with me. So I never felt like I fit in. I was different. I danced to the beat of my own drum, and I always have. I've just been overly positive, and I don't know if that's a trauma response. I grew up around alcoholism as well, with family and extended family. I would say that's what, tore my family apart at a young age. Luckily, I still have a good relationship with my father and my mother. And my family, but addiction is really prevalent in our communities, and it always has been. But we live through it, and we love the people that are around us, and we take care of each other. So I just always wanted to not be a stereotype. I just remember being from a young age, having to do like the letters or like having to justify my identity as just this person. When my mom's like, you're just the same as everybody. I'm like, but I'm not the same. Like, I don't feel the same. Right. And when I was answering this question, and I'm so happy to share it with you, I really wanted to go to church because that just seemed like where everybody had it together. And church school, they got to get out of school to go to church school. And I love singing songs in church. So my grandmother is Catholic, my mom's mom. So I would go to church with her a lot. And then my friends are also Catholic. So I would go to Catholic church school with them, but I wasn't baptized. So I just got a lot of blessings and didn't get to participate in a lot of things because of that. So there, I also felt like I wasn't included, right? I felt excluded. So really a lot of trying to figure out who I am, through high school. So instead of me feeling so excluded from everything, I decided to create this feeling of inclusion of everybody else. I wanted everybody else to feel like they were comfortable around me. And I think I still do that to this day because I have people who are like, you're just so easy to talk to and you just are so comforting. And I'm like, I think I just learned this from a super early age, right? And I say, that's how I became Snowball Queen. And that's like kind of equivalent to a homecoming and a prom queen because we didn't have a prom queen. So we had homecoming and a snowball, like a winter formal. And I say it's because I made everybody else feel included. My whole school, like I had friends all the way in 7th grade when I was a senior. I was involved in FCCLA, which is like family. Oh my God, I can't remember, but it used to be FLA, FHA. So Future Leaders of America, Future Homemakers of America. And then they changed it to like FCCLA. I was involved in that for a really long time. I was in track. I was a cheerleader for a couple of years. A football cheerleader. I was in art club. I was in choir. I was in the Indian student club. So the Native student club. I was in one-act plays. I was also in Odyssey of the Mind, Destination Imagination, where you kind of get a problem and then you get to like create your own set and a play in like 8 minutes. I was part of that for a year. And I also was the go-to student, I would say, from like our nurse and who did like tobacco prevention for the younger grades. So I was a go to the elementary school and read books to them, hang out with kids. And I also sold popcorn every Friday. It sounds so silly because the kids, you'd pop popcorn and the kids would come and give you a quarter and give them popcorn. But I always was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then anytime they needed somebody to dress up in the silly aardvark, was it an aardvark costume? I can't remember. It's like this big green thing. I want to say it was an aardvark. I might be wrong, but I dressed up.
Yeah.
I was the person to do that. So I was super involved. That's me at the early years. That's kind of really shaped me to when I went to college. And then when I hit college, things changed.
Well, I think that your story is so powerful too, because there are so many instances, and this is not to sugarcoat your experience, but so many people have those instances where they feel excluded. They don't feel like they fit in. And I remember when I was little, I had terrible, terrible eczema and I would like itch my hair out. And people oftentimes thought I was like I was going through cancer treatment or something. And I just wanted to fit in. Same as what you were experiencing. It was like, I just wanted to fit in and I wouldn't get invited to birthday parties or things because I looked different or I had rash. And but I did the same thing that you did. Like now to this day, it's like, I want everybody to feel included. I always see the people that are standing on the sidelines at like parties or dances. And I think that's the power that all of us have. And we have a choice to either become the victim to the things that have happened to us or who the world perceives us to be. No one really knows who we are except for us, And so I think it's so beautiful how you've turned that and turned your own experience. And I wanted to talk about too, like the experience of living on a reservation, because so many people that are listening, they probably don't really understand what that was like. And I'm sure in some ways, like you shared, it was amazing because you have this built-in family, like all of us dream, especially in the days of COVID, it's like a dream of like living nearby your family members. But on the flip side, it's so isolating. And that's why you brought up like alcoholism. I know that that's why there are a lot of issues on reservations as well, because people feel so isolated. Suicide rates are really high. And there is this kind of exclusion.
Yeah. If you go back to when reservations were created, they were spaces that were not meant to, they had poor agriculture. The land was really poorly managed. It was meant to, wipe out Indigenous people. That was the goal, right? That was the goal, if you know history. And when I say my life changed when I went to college, it's because I started taking history classes. And I remember leaving my classes crying because I'm like, wow, why did I not know this, right? But now, working in and around American Indian communities, tribal communities, I've learned so much over the years, and I'm still learning, right? And it's still painful. But growing up, like, people thrived on reservations. Tribes are thriving. Like, and I think that's what people forget, is that they're sovereign nations, and we have businesses, we have communities, we have our own government system. We have, fire stations, police stations, we are just like our own little towns. I remember when I was in 11th grade, I was a girls' state citizen. If you know what girls' state is, it's like they pick, I think it's like the local Lions Club, maybe, or like the VFW. They pick one person to go down to the Twin Cities, and we would stay and roommate with other girls and around the state. So girls' state, we go down to the Twin Cities. We all stay on a campus, and basically what you do is you take on roles, like governmental roles, like city commissioner. So you have cities, and then you go statewide, and somebody's the governor at the end of the week. I had a roommate who was from Southern Minnesota. And I remember I became friends with her, and I haven't connected with her for a really long time. We used to write letters pre-internet to each other, and then we just lost track of each other. But her name was Amber, and she was this white girl. And she was like, "You live on a reservation?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "What is it like?" And I was like, she's like, "Do you have running water and electricity?" I'm like, "Yeah." Yes. And she's like, "What does your house look like? Do you like live in a teepee?" And I'm like, "No, my house is blue." Like, I live in a house and I have my own room. I even have my own karaoke machine. Like, I have my own things, And so that was another early memory of me being like, what the heck? Like, people don't know what a reservation is like, right? So we have media, if you think of cowboys and Indians, right? Although that genre, the Western films and the broken English and all the stereotypes that are perpetuated throughout media, you don't really have a deep, like, a sense of like, what is a reservation like? So there is a lot of questions like, what was it like living on a reservation? I'm like, well, it was like living in any town, except I had my family close because we all lived in this small area. I had my grandma down the road. I had my cousins around the corner of my house. I had aunties all over the place. And you also have like adopted aunties and cousins and people who are not really related to you, but we just have the sense of community and taking care of each other. That's just our nature as Indigenous people. And you know people across the res. And it's funny because I say anytime I go anywhere and I go to a reservation, I always feel the most comfortable when I'm on a res because I just feel like it's home and it's safe. It's a place that was not meant for us to thrive, and now we're thriving communities.
Watch One Girl Revolution's Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, on our YouTube channel or at onegirlrevolution.com. The Girl Inside features a poignant look at the stories of incarcerated women within Cook County Jail and a life-changing academic course taught by Dr. Laura Biaggi called Storytelling as a Healing Art. This short documentary reunites Dr. Biaggi with 5 of her former students for a special one-day course on the transformative power of our stories and our voices. And what is revealed is the girl inside. Watch the Emmy-nominated short documentary The Girl Inside today on YouTube or at onegirlrevolution.com.
Okay, so talk about you shared that your life really changed in college and how led you to what you're doing now. Can you share about that, going to college and how your life changed?
Yeah, so I started college right out of high school, and I'm still continuing to go to college. I'm entering another master's program this fall. In 2004 is when I graduated from high school. And I went to a community college. And that it was over in Cloquet. So I went to Fawn Sampson Community College for one semester. And I was in love at this point, to my high school sweetheart. And so being an hour and a half away from him was just, oh my gosh, unheard of. So I would come home like every weekend, and I just don't think I was in it. Right. And I was like, well, I'm going to finish out the semester. At least I finished. And then I'm going to move back home and take a year off and then go to the community college here, which is Itasca Community College in Grand Rapids. So I did. So I quit, and I got a job, and I lived with my boyfriend's family. And I started college back up here at Itasca Community College, and I got to learn under a man who was a very respected elder in our community. He has since passed on, but I feel so lucky. I learned Ojibwe. I got to learn about American Indians in school because they have an Indigenous emphasis program at Itasca. And it was the first time where I really felt like I belonged somewhere in education. I was like a C, B student. I was in the middle of my class. I never really thrived. I didn't care because I was like, I just want to get through school. and this time I'm in college, and I ended up being an honor student. I was part of an honor society even. And I was like, wow, college is easy. It's such a different feeling. But I took American Indian history classes, American Indian philosophy. I got to learn from this really amazing elder person. He talked from his heart when he taught, and it was so connected to me that there was moments where we would talk about boarding schools and the removal acts and things, all the things that have been just so ugly that you don't learn. And I just felt like a piece of me would die. I'm going to cry right now. It's emotional. And I was so mad. I'm like, why did I know these things? And why was this kept from me? And it felt like I could feel the pain, and I understand why I felt so out of place, right? Because I got to know some of my history. And even though it wasn't directly me at the moment, she's just part of this larger community of Indigenous people, right? There's only so much of us. We make up less than 1% of the population. That kind of really, I think lit a fire in me even more so. I've had the coals burning when I was younger. I've always done education when I was in high school and wanted people to know about my culture. And I always did speeches and things and highlighted. But I was like, well, I want to work I need to give back, right? And I tried so hard to figure out what that was. And I think I finally found it after my current role, what my role is in the community, because there are so many issues, so many things that affect my community. And when I say my community, I'm talking about all of Indian country in Canada and North America, because I have family and friends all over this continent. And so I, worked for a tribal college. So I graduated anyways with honors. And then I went to Bemidji State, and I ended up doing a double major there with visual arts and then American Indian studies, because I was like, I just want to keep learning more, right? And again, same thing, leaving my class, crying and heartbroken because, there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of frustration. And I don't know if there's this deep sense of not belonging in a lot of Native Americans, but for me, it was there's just emptiness, right? That's just I didn't fit anywhere in the world, and there's nothing in this world that was made for me, right? And not knowing about that at an early age, and then finding out about it when you're early 20s was so devastating, and it hurt, and it's painful. But the more that I learned about the history, you realize American Indians weren't even citizens until the 20s, right? I had great grandparents that were born that weren't even citizens. So I'm a third generation, fourth generation US citizen. So, and we were, first people of this land, we were here. So when I put things like that, and so I've tried really hard through college to just be more educative on a level that was honest, right? Now I had history to back me up. Now I have people that have studied and researched. I mean, we have philosophers, we have researchers, we have all kinds of amazing people out there who have done work prior to me. So I was like, wow, I look up to these people and I want to be able to continue on that legacy, right? Of telling our story, or at least telling my story. I can only speak for myself, but a lot of people don't even know that there's over 580 some tribes, federally recognized tribes in the United States.
They don't. That's the thing, is people
they're different.
Know, right? People
they're different.
Don't know. And you don't see representation. You don't, because we hear all the time about, you don't see representation for different groups of people. But I think so often about Native Americans, and thankfully there are good things that are happening and you're starting to see representation. I know that there have been certain things, my background's in PR and media, which I know I shared with you. And so I'm always looking for stories. And I think so often Native Americans have been forgotten about completely. And thankfully, you see Lisa Ling, you see some other people that are using their platform and saying, let's have discussions. Let's highlight these stories. That's what One Girl is all about. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on to share your story and all the great work that you're doing. But it really just takes one person, and you're doing so much.
And I think that's what's so like where we're at this point, right? There's moments where I'm just like, I'd rather give up and sacrifice everything that I've worked for you to listen to what I'm saying. Like, because this is how much it matters. Right. And I'm a little more brave. And I've said things to my colleagues where I'm like, I need you to step up. And this is like life or death for my community, for a lot of people. And it has ended in death for some. Right. I see struggling kids having to, take care of their families because addiction is so prevalent in our communities because we have food deserts. We don't have opportunities. Like, luckily, like my tribe provides transportation for a lot of their employees to our casinos, but I would ride the shuttle to work 2 hours one way for 3 years in college. Like, because they were so flexible with my schedule. I worked a 40-hour-a-week job and went to school full time up at Bemidji State. And it still took me 3 years to finish. Well, because I double majored, but it took me 3 years to finish. And at the same time, I was going through a divorce, like trying to navigate my own personal life. Like, I changed, right? You change and you don't, I was so impacted by the things around me and my own life. And I moved away from home. I got married. I graduated college all within like a 3-month period. And then I was like, and then depression hit and anxiety. And I didn't know what that was because we don't talk about mental health, right? As people in general. And it's not really talked about in Indian country either. Because we come from a lot of hurt and pain and trauma. And so like even our grandparents and some people's parents, my friends' parents won't even talk about their experiences, right? So our trauma is fresh. The wounds are not even like scabbed over yet, and that's one of the biggest things that people say to me too, is like, well, it happened so far in the past. And my own people, like family. And I moved away and then I came back and now I'm just like, oh, this is exhausting. I have a tough job. I feel, I really found my place. I work in leadership and civic engagement. I know my role within my own communities is to lift up others, to build people up. I don't know all things. I am not an expert in all things. There's a lot of things that I want to support. But when I was young, I was like, I want to change the world. And then it came to, I'm just going to change my world. Yeah. Because that's as far as I can reach, So at least any person I've ever met, I at least want them to feel good in some way. I want them to feel inspired, even if it's just for a moment, or at least, be kind, be nice. And that's just the type of person that I am. And I don't even know if I answered the question because I was trying to ramble.
Well, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because a lot of times we hear, you hear about women that inspire you, or stories that you are just really blown away by. And, this woman started an organization, or this woman, started 5 businesses. I feel like I've been hearing that all the time, where it's like, all these entrepreneurs that have like 10 different businesses or 5 businesses. And the reality is every single person has the power to change the world through their life. And you're doing that exactly. You're the embodiment of a one girl revolution to me, because you're living out your life in such a way that is highlighting people that are often forgotten about. You're elevating the people around you. So you stepping forward, you speaking up, you doing the work that you're doing, you're opening up opportunities for other people to empower others. You hear that saying, empowered women empower women. And that's,
I have a shirt that says that.
Yeah. And it's so true, but it's even just any person, anybody who's listening. We have people that listen that aren't just, it's not just women that listen, but we all have that power. When we can empower ourselves, or we can find who we were truly meant to be, we can open up opportunities for other people. So I would love for you to share. I know you're a woman of many talents. You have your job that you're doing, but then you're also involved in a lot of different things. I would love for you to just share about all the work that you're doing, and what it means for people that are listening, how you're really empowering others through your work.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I feel like I can't say no. I went through a period where I'm like, okay, you're just going to say no to everything. And then I have a son, and then I really got good at saying no to other people. But now that he's older, and now that I bought a house, and now I feel really comfortable in my job, I feel like things are coming naturally. And I want to be a part of things that are going to be making change. So in my work, I do a lot of leadership and civic engagement. So that's mainly my job, is just building relationships, right? And finding those connections. I found out that I have just this natural gift of building connections. And things just make sense to me, I guess, that way. And I never thought in a million years that I would have a career in leadership, right? I was like, wow, you can actually make money off of being a leader. So I'm also I got asked to be on the board. I've been asked to be on a few boards before, but I don't think I was in a place to be on a board. And I always wanted to be involved because I'm such an involved person. I just will answer the emails in a different way. So I got asked to be on the board of 100 Rural Women, which is an organization that just is surrounded by women, supporting women. They just started, so they're very brand new. And we have the board and we meet. I think we just become a 501c3. So the goal is to have 100 meetings around the state of Minnesota, and just bringing women together and supporting women, and kind of building women up. That was really cool, because I think I'm in this weird place where people, like, even just you asking me to be on a podcast, I'm like, me, and my husband's like, yeah, you do great things. I'm like, what do I do? Like, I feel like I've just been me my whole life, right? Just being the woman that I am, and being the person, the kind person that I want to be. I want people to feel welcome and comfort. And somehow this has turned me into getting interviewed in podcasts. And this is not the first one that I've been interviewed in, but I have major imposter syndrome. Like, I'm like, I still feel like the 15-year-old girl sometimes jamming out in front of her mirror in her karaoke machine and applying pounds of makeup, like blue eyeshadow, like from the 90s, right? Like late 80s, early 90s is like my childhood. So I still feel like her. And so it's hard for me to build myself up and talk about myself. And like, I try to be a humble person. I try to be humble. That's part of, to have humility is one of our teachings. And so it's really hard for me to talk about myself.
Humility is a powerful thing. And I think the world needs more of it. There are definitely a lot of people that need more of it. We all need more of it, I guess. But no, I just see everything that you're doing. And on top of that, you're a mother, you're a dancer, you're a singer, you're like you do so many artists.
I try to be a good standing person in my community in Indian country. Like I'm getting back into dancing, like jingle dress. I have always been a jingle dress dancer from as long as I can remember. My grandmother just passed this past spring in March, and it really, like, I feel lost and sad about it because COVID really put distance between, me and a lot of family. And I moved home to be closer to my family. I moved home for my my son to be connected to my grandparents, right? I was lucky enough to meet 3 of my great grandparents who have made a huge impact on my life. So that part of me, and then I love singing. I actually have a guitar. I used to play it. Now I forgot, but I want to get back into playing my guitar, and just music and dancing is a huge part of me.
When you were talking about the jingle dresses, I remember being a little kid because my mom would take us to powwow. Yeah. She still does. Even though we're adults, she still is like, every time there's a powwow, we all go. But I remember being little and just like dreaming of becoming a dancer. So I should now.
And you can.
Gold, I know.
And you can.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So I hope that I get to come and see you guys dance at some point.
Yes. And I know that there's some good powwows in Michigan, so we can probably make our way over there.
Yeah, come to Michigan.
We are stable. This is the first time we've actually I think Sam and I have moved almost every year since we've been together, just because him and I travel so much. We are just like these nomad living, we live our life by the seat of our pants. We never make plans, and we'll just pack the car and be like, let's go to Oklahoma. Let's go to like the East Coast. Like, and we're just, and now that we have a kid, we have our son, we want him to have roots, but be able to travel. So we bought a house, and so we're living in our house now. And this is the first time I've had a kitchen table that I'm sitting at right now. The first time I've had a kitchen table since I lived with my parents.
Have you subscribed to the One Girl Revolution podcast? We have new episodes coming out every week, and you don't want to miss them. Subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.
I'm so excited for you and so excited to see like where things go from here in your work and in everything that you're involved in. What does the future hold for you, or what do you hope that the future holds in your dream of dream worlds? I know there's a lot of work still yet to do, and I think our lives will just be forever evolving. And I know there are so many different things that we could talk about too with regards to the missing and murdered Indigenous women. We didn't talk about that. And I think that that's a genocide that no one is talking about. And like the support that we all need to give to our Indigenous brothers and sisters. But thinking about all of that, thinking about the work that you do, what do you hope that the future holds for you and all that you're doing?
Well, 2 different planes, right? One, focusing on my family. I want us to travel to powwows and dance, but me and my husband want to have our own print shop, like screen printing, and we all want to have our own workshop where we just create art together. And we actually want to travel and have like stands at a festival where we sell our crafts, and just something that includes traveling and selling art and doing art, right? And being involved in art. And maybe I'll get back into my beadwork. Like that's me. That's where my heart is in art. And I want to support Indigenous artists. My husband just got a job recently with the McCrosty Art Center here in Grand Rapids. So he will be hopefully doing some outreach in our community. And I want to lift up Native artists in this area too. And just keep supporting Native people in any way that I can. Professionally, I hope that I can continue working with the University of Minnesota Extension. I really love my job. I love working in leadership, and I want to create, I want to help create like leadership programming for Native people that's catered and made for us. In my work, I always say like, we need to stop checking off our boxes, right, for Native people and then go. We're so used to that. I'm growing up. I remember the little church ladies would come with their cookies and we would just talk about Jesus. And then I was like, I wanted to go for the cookies. But then like, I just think that people have so often taken from Native people, and I'm working for the University of Minnesota. I am in a place to help create change in a systemic level. And in these university systems and institutions that weren't designed for people like me. So I'm going to keep creating buzz, keep creating conversations, and keep supporting those who focus on Indigenous issues like missing and murdered Indigenous women, and addictions, any other contemporary issues that may, suicide prevention that may be impacting our community still to this day. So I see my role as being one of those people that supports and lifts up those voices. And that's why I always am like, why do you want to hear from me? But it's important work. I feel like I have a good connection and good relationship with all my coworkers. And I'm not afraid to speak up. I have always tried to be brave. So there were moments where, I actually had to call out a really prestigious person in our organization because of something that was said stereotyping Native people. And it was a moment where I was like, my blood pressure was rising. I'm like, you got to say something, right? And that was like my second week of work. And so I've just been kind of using my voice in a positive way and bringing awareness as much as I can. Very long-winded answer, but that's my answer.
You're doing it though. But there's so many facets to your life. And like I said, you are a woman of many talents. You're involved in so many different things. And I just can't wait to see what the future holds for you and for your sweet family and everything you guys are doing. For people that are listening, this might be the first time that some people have even heard from an Indigenous woman. The reality is that you might be the first person that they've heard from. Mm-hmm. If they want to learn more and they want to become more engaged, what advice would you give to somebody who's listening, who wants to learn more about the history of Native Americans, and then what can we do to support our Indigenous brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I think just being aware and understanding the complexities of tribal governments, tribal communities, and what impacts us. I think people have a tendency to forget that we are thriving communities, right? That we have businesses, that we have actual houses. And I giggle because I think back to 2004, right? That's people asking if I live in a house. So I do a lot of presentations and things around just Indigenous issues and Indigenous awareness and just trying to lift up. So find out where you're from, find out the land you're on, but also find out your own history, because I think when we have that culture and that heritage identity, we kind of relate to others that have similar, we connect with people who have these deep roots of tradition, right? And we have a developed respect for that. If you Google search land acknowledgement, I think you'll find a map. I can't remember. It's like native.co.us or something. It'll tell you what land you're on, traditional land you're on throughout the whole Canada and North America. Start doing your own research. Find out what tribes are close to you. Attend a powwow. Most powwows are open to the public. They're very commercialized now. Some of them are contest powwows, and it's such a huge part of our community in a lot of ways. Seek out Indigenous artists, fashion designers, and buy authentic Native American art. Stay away from the dream catchers. I laugh because it's people always can you make me a dream catcher? I'm like, yeah, I learned to do that when I was in elementary school. But buy authentic art and support authentic businesses, right? And that's something that people think is can I wear? I had this shirt that said Indigenous and had a picture of a woman. This woman's like, can I wear this? And I'm like, yeah, I think we're all Indigenous to somewhere. And you're also supporting my business. You're also supporting a Native business. And we work really hard to, put our work into our products and our things. And there's even soap manufacturers and things. So just really being knowledgeable. And I always say, if you can find it on Google, which you can find a lot of stuff on Google, don't come to me and ask me questions on things, because then that's tokenizing me as a person, mm-hmm. saying oh, can you tell me about this, right? Without doing your own research first. So there's a very fine line, but there are a lot of resources, especially here in Minnesota, and I'm sure in other states as well, that have webinars and free resources. Native Governance Center, I'm going to give them a shout out, has really great resources. The Blinded Foundation here has a community leadership program too. The Bush Foundation has some great initiatives going on. The Native collective.
Yeah.
They have a lot of really great, they're, I think, nationwide. The other ones were more like this region focused, but I think the Native collective, where they have some really awesome initiatives too. So there's a lot of organizations, a lot of information out there for people to just know. You just have to be curious enough, right? To just be like, let me learn more today, just a little bit here and there. And you're not it's going to be overwhelming because there's so many things to like think about. Right. But I think people just forget that we are thriving communities.
Yeah. Well, I'll get those links from you because I think it'd be great to put that in the show notes for people that are listening that want to learn more.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've just noticed so much is on social media, like I've started following so many Indigenous women on Instagram and different things. And Sephora, I'm sure you saw Sephora just had a new ad that came out featuring an Indigenous woman. And like, it's out there, but we need more people to share that kind of stuff and to elevate it. Because like if Sephora, if we share that ad or if we share other social media or follow Indigenous artists and buy from them, it's going to encourage more people to buy from them and support them. So I always tell people that it doesn't take money to make a difference. It actually just takes your social media or your voice. You know, if you read something or they're listening to this podcast and hopefully share your story with someone else, or like, oh, I just heard this podcast and this amazing woman, Fawn, is doing this, that, and the other thing. And this is her story. That's more powerful than any amount of money that we put anywhere. So just giving people a voice and sharing stories. And I'm just so grateful to have you on the podcast and for all that you do. How can people follow you and your husband and support your work? And I'll be sure to put the links to anything in the show notes too.
Yeah. So the collective is the NDN Collective. I know I was like, it's Native something, but NDN Collective. But you can find, so my husband is Samsoche Sampson, and him and his brother are called the Sampson Bros. If you quick Google search Sampson Bros, you'll probably find them, but they have a Facebook and they also have a web page. You can find their work there, find them on YouTube and all kinds of things. They did a lot of cool projects in the last few years. We also have a Facebook page that I need to revamp. It's under the name Kuskana Designs. It doesn't sound like anything it's reading, so we'll be changing that up. But you can find me on Facebook, Fawn Sampson. I am also run the Minnesota Indigenous Leadership Network page, which is through my work, where we try to lift up Native voices and just share and support our communities by sharing their stories, as in like things that are typed up, right? People, other organizations that have been doing the work too. So I'm just trying to create this large network of Indigenous leaders and highlighting and sharing and resharing stories. We also have my coworker, I'm going to give him a shout out too. He has a Indigenized Connections on Air podcast that he does where he interviews Indigenous leaders in Minnesota. So give that a check, and I'll give you all these links too.
We'll put it all in the show notes because I think it's good for people just to have easy access to things like this.
And I'm starting, now that I have my home, I'm going to start doing and creating more art. And I have an Instagram, Fawn Genetics. It's like Fawn Genetics. It's my name with like genetics. It's awesome. Play on words. One of my friends gave it to me, but I'm going to start posting my art there and creating there. So yeah, hopefully you'll see more things coming out from me in the future, but you can do a good Google search. I'm sure you'll find us somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I will put all those different links so people can easily find you and follow what you're doing. And we'll continue to share everything that you're doing. Once you're putting more art and stuff up, we'll continue to share that. But Fawn, before I let you go, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, because this podcast is focused on women and girls, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
Be brave, right? I think, and so one message, and I'm going to give a shout out to all my friends. We have tattoos in different places that all say the same thing. It says, to each her own. And that's the empowering each other and empowering women and identifying that we're all different and that we all can be supportive of each other. Because I think we're stronger when we're supporting each other. We're stronger when we're working together. And I think, and we didn't even get to talk about the power of women in our culture, and that we just are life givers, right? Creators and the mothers. And there's a whole cultural piece, and how I could, maybe that's another podcast for the future, but yeah, empowered women, empower women, right? Mm-hmm. That is the message. And I hold that true and near and dear to my heart. So that would be the message that I would say.
It's so beautiful. And I love your tattoo idea. That's so awesome. That's so beautiful. Fawn, I'm so grateful for you sharing your voice, for sharing your story on this podcast. Thank you for being on, and thank you for all the great work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to come out and visit, and hopefully I can give you some more names of some really awesome other Indigenous women throughout, this country that you can interview and highlight their stories as well, because there's so much that we could talk about.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.